Today I would like to invite you to listen to the Dhammapada of the Buddha Shakyamuni, the 137th verse from the Buddhist scriptures on the YouTube channel Thien Thai in the USA. He who with the rod harms the rodless and harmless, soon will come to one of these states. Thus the Blessed One spoke with compassion steady and unwavering, revealing a truth rooted in non-harm and deep responsibility. In the time of the Buddha, there was a man who carried authority and strength. Believing power gave him permission to strike those who could not defend themselves. He raised his hand against the gentle, used force against the quiet, and caused pain where there was no threat. His mind justified these actions as right and necessary, blinded by pride and delusion. The Buddha, seeing beyond appearances, taught that harming the harmless is among the gravest forms of ignorance, for it violates the natural harmony that sustains all life. Those who do not strike back are not weak. They are simply without weapons. To harm them is to turn against innocence itself. The Buddha explained that violence directed toward the defenseless does not disappear into emptiness. It returns through the lawful unfolding of cause and effect. The rod raised outward becomes a burden carried inward. Fear grows in the heart of the aggressor. Suspicion replaces peace. Rest becomes shallow. Joy becomes fragile. Even before external consequences appear, the mind is already wounded by its own actions. The story shared by the Buddha was not spoken to instill fear, but to awaken conscience. He taught that true strength lies not in domination, but in restraint. True authority is the mastery of one's own impulses. When anger is indulged, it enslaves. When cruelty is practiced, it isolates. When power is abused, it erodes the foundation of trust that supports human life. The Buddha showed that violence toward the innocent plants seeds of suffering that mature in many forms, through inner torment, social discord, and the unraveling of one's own stability. The verse stands as a mirror, inviting each being to look honestly at how power is used, how words strike like rods, and how silence can be harmed as deeply as flesh. The harmless are not separate from us. They are reflections of our own vulnerability. To protect them is to protect our own humanity. To harm them is to wound the shared heart of existence. The Buddha's teaching here is both warning and refuge. It warns that cruelty carries unavoidable consequence, and it offers refuge in the path of non-harm, where compassion replaces force and understanding dissolves aggression. The true story within this verse reveals that suffering does not arise by chance. It follows intention like a shadow follows the body. When intention is rooted in violence, the shadow darkens the path. When intention is rooted in kindness, the path becomes light. Thus the Buddha's words invite a turning, a gentle yet firm call to lay down the rod, to see the defenseless not as objects but as fellow beings, and to recognize that peace begins the moment harm is refused. The teaching now unfolds with quiet clarity, guiding the heart to contemplate the nature of harm and the roots from which it grows. When the mind is unsettled, it seeks release through control. When fear arises, it masks itself as strength. The Dharma invites us to see this honestly, without judgment, without concealment. Violence does not begin in the hand. It begins in the mind that feels separate, threatened, or superior. The Buddha taught that when one believes oneself above others, compassion withers and cruelty finds justification. Yet this belief is born from misunderstanding, for all beings share the same longing for safety and peace. When this truth is forgotten, the rod is lifted not only in form but in thought and speech. Harsh words become blows. Cold indifference becomes abandonment. The Dharma gently reveals that harm wears many faces, some obvious, some subtle, all carrying consequence. When one becomes mindful of this, the heart softens. Awareness interrupts the momentum of aggression and creates space for choice. In that space, wisdom can speak. The practitioner learns to pause before reacting, to feel the stirrings of anger without acting upon them, to recognize that power used to dominate only deepens insecurity. True security arises from inner stability, from knowing that one can meet difficulty without causing injury. The Buddha emphasized that non-harm is not weakness, but profound courage. It takes great strength to refrain from retaliation, to respond to hostility with calm, to protect the vulnerable without hatred toward the aggressor. Such strength is cultivated through patience, understanding, and consistent reflection. The Dharma teaches that patience is not passive endurance, but active wisdom that sees the long arc of consequence. When one strikes another, one strikes oneself through the web of interdependence. When one protects another, one strengthens the fabric of trust that supports all beings. Over time, the practitioner begins to feel the truth of this not as an idea, but as lived experience. The heart becomes more sensitive, more attuned to the effects of its actions. A careless word feels heavy. A kind gesture feels light. This sensitivity is not fragility. It is clarity. It allows one to navigate life with care, avoiding unnecessary harm and cultivating beneficial conditions. The Dharma speaks of this as purification, not of moral superiority, but of intention. As intentions become clearer, actions naturally follow a path of gentleness. The mind no longer seeks to impose itself on the world, but to understand it. In this understanding, compassion grows effortlessly. One sees that those who harm often act from deep confusion and unresolved pain. This does not excuse their actions, but it explains them. With this insight, the practitioner can oppose harm without hatred, set boundaries without cruelty, and seek justice without vengeance. The Buddha's teaching thus offers a way beyond cycles of retaliation. It points toward reconciliation rooted in truth rather than suppression. When harm is met with awareness, its momentum weakens. When fear is met with understanding, it dissolves. The Dharma encourages us to examine our daily lives for moments when the rod appears in subtle form. Perhaps it is impatience toward the slow, dismissal of the quiet, or exploitation of those with less power. Seeing these moments clearly is the beginning of change. The practitioner learns to replace force with listening, dominance with cooperation, and control with trust. This transformation does not happen overnight. It unfolds through steady practice, gentle correction, and sincere intention. Each time harm is restrained, a seed of peace is planted. Each time kindness is chosen, the world becomes slightly safer. The Buddha taught that this is how suffering decreases, not through grand gestures, but through countless small acts of non-harm. The path is simple, yet demanding. It asks for continuous awareness and humility. It asks one to admit when harm has been caused and to resolve to act differently. In doing so, the heart becomes lighter, less burdened by regret and fear. This lightness is a sign that the rod has been laid down, not only in the hand, but in the mind. The Dharma assures that such a life, rooted in care and restraint, leads naturally toward peace, both within oneself and in the shared world of beings. The path of reflection deepens further, inviting the practitioner to observe how power and vulnerability weave through every encounter. The Dharma reveals that no being exists outside relationship, and that every action reverberates through unseen connections. When one understands this, the urge to harm loses its appeal, for one sees that injury fractures the very ground upon which one stands. The Buddha taught that harmony is not imposed, but cultivated through respect and mindful presence. When strength is guided by wisdom, it becomes protection rather than threat. When authority is shaped by compassion, it becomes service rather than domination. The practitioner learns to examine motivation with care, asking whether actions arise from fear or from understanding. This inquiry is not harsh. It is gentle and sincere, allowing truth to surface naturally. Through such examination, hidden tendencies are revealed, not to shame, but to heal. The Dharma teaches that awareness itself is transformative. When anger is seen clearly, it begins to lose its urgency. When the desire to control is recognized, it loosens its grip. In this clarity, the mind becomes spacious, capable of holding discomfort without projecting it onto others. This capacity is essential, for many forms of harm arise from the refusal to feel one's own pain. When discomfort is avoided, it seeks expression outwardly. When it is welcomed with mindfulness, it dissolves into understanding. The Buddha encouraged practitioners to sit with their feelings as they are, to breathe with them, and to learn from them. In doing so, the heart becomes resilient rather than reactive. Resilience allows one to face conflict without resorting to force. It allows one to speak firmly without aggression and to act decisively without cruelty. The Dharma emphasizes that non-harm is an active practice, requiring vigilance and care. It asks that one be attentive not only to actions, but to tone, timing, and intention. A word spoken at the wrong moment can wound deeply. Silence offered when support is needed can cause harm. Thus, wisdom requires sensitivity, the ability to listen deeply and respond appropriately. This sensitivity grows through mindfulness and compassion, through a willingness to be present with others without imposing oneself upon them. The practitioner begins to see that protecting the harmless does not always mean intervening physically. Often it means creating conditions where fear cannot thrive. It means fostering understanding, offering reassurance, and standing with those who feel unseen. Such presence can be more powerful than force, for it addresses the roots of harm rather than its symptoms. The Buddha's teaching here encourages the cultivation of inner strength, a strength that does not depend on superiority, but on steadiness. This steadiness allows one to remain grounded amid chaos, to act without being swept away by emotion. Over time, the practitioner experiences a shift in identity. One no longer sees oneself as an isolated individual defending personal territory, but as part of a living whole. From this perspective, harming another feels like harming oneself. This realization is not intellectual. It is felt in the body and heart as a natural response. Compassion arises not as an obligation, but as an expression of understanding. The Dharma also acknowledges that mistakes will occur. Even with the best intentions, harm may still be caused. The teaching does not demand perfection. It invites responsibility. When harm is recognized, one is encouraged to acknowledge it, to make amends where possible, and to learn from the experience. This process itself is liberating, for it prevents the accumulation of guilt and defensiveness. It allows growth to continue without interruption. The Buddha taught that humility is a companion to wisdom, for it keeps the heart open and receptive. A humble mind is willing to listen, to change, and to apologize. Such a mind is unlikely to wield the rod, for it recognizes its own fallibility. In this humility, trust is built, both within oneself and with others. Trust becomes the foundation of peaceful coexistence. When trust is present, fear recedes, and with it the impulse toward harm. The practitioner thus comes to value gentleness as a form of intelligence, a way of navigating complexity without violence. Gentleness does not avoid truth. It delivers truth with care. It does not avoid conflict. It transforms conflict through understanding. The Dharma assures that a life guided by these principles is not only ethically sound, but deeply fulfilling. There is a quiet joy in knowing that one's presence does not cause fear. There is relief in laying down the burden of aggression. There is peace in contributing to a world where the vulnerable are respected and the strong are restrained by wisdom. In this way, the teaching continues to shape the heart, guiding it away from harm and toward a way of being that honors life in all its forms. As the teaching gently settles, the heart is invited to rest in contemplation, allowing the Dharma to sink deeply and quietly into awareness. The Buddha's words do not command. They illuminate. They reveal that the path of non-harm is not an ideal imposed from outside, but a natural expression of understanding. When one sees clearly, one cannot help but care. When one understands interdependence, one cannot ignore the impact of one's actions. The Dharma reassures that every moment offers a new opportunity to choose kindness over force, restraint over impulse, and wisdom over habit. Even when the world appears harsh, the heart can remain soft without becoming weak. This softness is strength grounded in clarity. It allows one to meet suffering without adding to it, to protect without oppressing, and to speak without wounding. The practitioner comes to trust this strength, for it proves itself again and again in daily life. Conflicts are resolved more easily. Relationships become more honest. Inner turmoil diminishes. The mind feels less divided, less driven by the need to dominate or defend. In this integration, peace arises naturally. The Dharma teaches that peace is not the absence of challenge, but the absence of harmful response. When challenges are met with awareness, they lose their power to provoke violence. The rod is no longer lifted because there is no need for it. Understanding has taken its place. The Buddha's teaching thus completes its circle, returning always to the heart. It reminds us that the harmless are not distant others, but reflections of our own vulnerability. To protect them is to honor life itself. To refrain from harm is to align with the deepest truth of existence. May these teachings continue to echo gently within, guiding thoughts, words, and deeds toward compassion and restraint. May the impulse to harm be transformed into the courage to understand. May strength be expressed as care, and power be guided by wisdom. In this way, the Dharma fulfills its purpose, not as a set of ideas, but as a living path walked with mindfulness and humility. Thank you for watching my video. Namo Amitabha. I wish to bring this merit towards all. disciples, and sentient beings, all of whom will attain Buddhahood. Remember to like, share, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I really appreciate your time.